Good afternoon for some of you, good evening for others, and welcome to the first Times Higher Education International Student Seminar. I'm Phil Baty, Chief Knowledge Officer at Times Higher Education, or THE as people usually call us these days. THE celebrates its 50th anniversary next year. We started providing insights on global higher education as a newspaper back in 1971. But since 2004, our famous World University Rankings have been providing students and their families with trusted, independent, and rigorous performance data on hundreds of the greatest universities right across the globe. Our rankings cover the full range of a university's key activities across 13 separate performance metrics against 11 broad subject areas, giving students data-driven assurances across the teaching and research environment, but also assurances on a university's links to business and industry, its resources, and its commitment to welcoming international students like you. Before my current role at THE, I was editor of the World University Rankings for over a decade. So I know very well, and I've seen it for myself, that for students like you and your families, choosing which university to trust with your higher education is surely the most important decision of your life. At THE, it's been our job to help students year after year to navigate this challenging, this confusing, this often intimidating, but this hugely exciting journey. We have over 2,500 students signed up for this seminar today, and we know that for you and your families, your decision-making journey, this vital, life-changing choice that you will be making is even more challenging, even more intimidating, and even more fraught with worry than ever before. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused huge disruption to the world and to our normal way of life. It's thrown the study plans of hundreds and thousands of students like you in disarray. Borders are closed, planes are grounded, many campuses are currently ghost towns. When the restrictions and lockdowns will be lifted, when universities will be ready and able to welcome new students, when it will be safe to begin a new life abroad, and of course, when this terrible global health emergency will end, these are all questions that remain unclear. As I said, THE, we are here to help you and to strive to provide as much clarity as possible. So we're really proud to be arranging and have arranged this special online seminar. It's the first of its kind. We want to help you and your families find the right way forward for you to make the most informed choices possible and to help you understand the risks and the challenges, but hopefully, of course, the wonderful rewards of starting a new life journey with a UK university. So we have a truly excellent panel of experts on the UK higher education sector with us today, perhaps the people closest to this current situation, right on top of the issues, real experts. And they're here to answer your questions. So please use the Q&A function on Zoom to ask the questions you need answers to. And please do upvote the questions you want to see prioritized. And we can crowdsource those questions that you believe are the most pressing. And please also use the hashtag on social media, THE Student Seminar too. But before we kick off with some scene setting, opening presentations, and before the Q&A, I'm pleased to introduce our co-host for this event, SI UK. So please welcome Rhian Thomas. She's the Global Sales Director of SI UK. Welcome, Rhian.
Thank you, Phil. And good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, or perhaps even good morning, depending on where in the world you are today. SI UK is delighted to be part of this event, looking at an absolutely critical topic for those international students who are currently considering their options in the UK. As one of the industry's leading sources of free, independent advice and support for international students applying to study in the United Kingdom, SI UK is only too aware of the very real concerns that students globally are facing right now surrounding the whole admission process for 2020. Indeed, our teams of experienced consultants right across the world, which includes a very large number situated in Asia, are dealing with thousands of students and their families right at this very moment, guiding them through the current maze of messages that are coming out from universities and trying to help them understand the options that they have to start their studies as planned later this year. SIUK is forecast to help approximately 45,000 students globally apply to UK universities by the end of 2020. And thus, we really do believe that we understand what international students are looking for. We're particularly delighted, therefore, to be part of this panel discussion that we are sure are going to help provide some real clarity for the student audience today, who are undoubtedly looking for some much needed answers. SIUK would like to formally thank THE, or the Times Higher Education, for putting on such an important event. I'm sure that many of the students online today will recognize THE as the publisher of arguably the most influential world university rankings, and indeed may well have used these rankings to help inform their decision about where they may wish to study. SIUK is also very pleased to announce that this seminar marks the start of a formal partnership between the two companies that will see us put to good use our very apparent complementary competencies and capabilities to reach tens of millions of prospective international students globally and to provide them with the very best advice and support possible when it comes to their future plans of studying overseas. I hope that you enjoy today's event, that you find it useful in helping to clarify the questions you have about what COVID-19 might mean for your plans of studying in the UK. Thank you very much. Enjoy the event, and back to you, Phil.
Thank you, Rhian. It's wonderful as you've been talking there to see all the messages popping up from all across Asia. It's wonderful to see so many of you joining the session, and it's a testament to how important these issues are, and of course how popular the UK is as a prospective destination for international students. So just to set the scene in terms of the UK's student population, our international student population, and of course the rankings, I'm delighted before we hear from Max Liu from the University of Surrey, before we get into the Q&A section, delighted to welcome Simon Baker. He's the data editor for Times Higher Education.
Hi everyone, and thanks very much, Phil. Welcome to everyone watching from wherever you are in the world. Today, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of where many of the students, specifically those from East Asia, study at UK universities. This region of the world made up by far the largest proportion of international entrants to universities in the UK last year. According to the UK's higher education statistic body, HESA, since 2012-13, the number of entrants from just China alone each year has exceeded the number from all other EU countries combined. So how has this growth developed over the last decade or so? And how does it compare to other countries where students from East Asia often choose to study? This slide shows how student numbers from East Asia have grown over the last 15 years in 4 countries: the UK, the US, Canada, and Australia. As you'll see from about 2010, the growth of student numbers from East Asia really took off in places like the US. But there's also been steady growth in the other countries too, at varying rates over time. Looking at just the UK and the individual countries in East Asia and the regions like Hong Kong, we can see that there has been a growth mainly from China, especially since 2010. But other countries too, and regions, have been seeing a growth as well. Hong Kong has increased its numbers, as too Malaysia. And even smaller places like Singapore have seen a large proportion of students coming from those countries to the UK. Well, what are the most popular universities for students from the region? These slides show the top 10 universities in terms of student numbers for the last academic year for various East Asian countries. This first one shows mainland China, and you can see that University College London had the most students from mainland China at just over 6,000 in total. If we look at other countries like South Korea, sometimes the universities are different. University of the Arts London is the most popular university for South Korean students, but UCL is also there in second place. If we look at Hong Kong, then UCL again comes top with more than 1,000 students from the territory. University Exeter is in second place. And then there are lots of other institutions that you may have seen on the previous lists that come into. For Taiwan, the numbers are slightly lower, but the University of Arts London again comes top there with UCL second. And for Japan, UCL is top. However, many of the universities in these slides are those with large numbers of students anyway, including institutions like UCL. These slides instead show the universities where students from the region make up a large share of all international students. So just looking at mainland China, at the University of Liverpool, more than 60% of all international students at the university are from China. The other universities after Liverpool that have a large share of their international students from the country include Cardiff, York, Sheffield, Birmingham and Leeds. Looking at Hong Kong, of course the percentages are lower because we're looking at the percentage of all international students that come from Hong Kong. But it's notable that some other universities there have showed clusters of students from that territory. Exeter is top, followed by Keele University, which actually is a smaller university, but a large proportion of its students come from Hong Kong. When we look at South Korea, it's interesting that the universities that come top there, Goldsmiths College, which is a college of the University of London, University of the Arts London, and Royal College of Art, all institutions that specialise in arts, more in arts courses, are the ones where the percentage of all international students is high. But postgraduate study at UK universities is also very popular for students from East Asia. These slides show the universities where a large proportion of international students come from countries in the region. So in other words, we're looking here at all postgraduate students or postgraduate international students and what share of those students at these universities come from mainland China. And you'll see that for Sheffield and Leicester, almost 60% of all international postgraduates come from mainland China. And some other universities on that list too have very high proportion of postgraduate international students from the country. I've shown here the figures also for Hong Kong, which shows that UCL has the highest share of its international postgraduates coming from Hong Kong, followed by Imperial College and then Bath. Turning to India for a second, as a separate graph, you can see that number of students going to the UK from India actually peaked around 2010, 2011, almost 40,000 in those years, and then began to tail off. And a lot of this has to do with a decision by the government to take away the post-study work visa that was in place previously. And that deterred a lot of Indian students from coming to the UK. That visa is being reinstated. The government announced it was reinstating that visa. And in any case, the number of students from India was beginning to climb again. Some figures from the Home Office on visas showed that actually the number of visas granted to Indian nationals almost doubled in 2019 to about 38,000. And the number of visas granted to Indian students has now been rising since 2016. So there looks like that is, although it doesn't show it in this graph because it goes up to 2017, student numbers are changing. And then this graph shows, in terms of Indian students, the most popular universities in terms of absolute numbers. De Montfort University there has more than 1,000 Indian students in the last academic year, followed by Hertfordshire and then Greenwich. But how do these universities do in terms of the THE's World University Rankings? A quick look at the 2020 results shows that many of the institutions already mentioned are in the top 200. The top university in the world is a UK university, the University of Oxford, with Cambridge in third and Imperial College also in the top 10. UCL, as we mentioned, one of the largest universities in the UK, is at 15, and LSE is also in the top 30. And as we scroll down through the other universities or UK universities that are in the top reaches of the World University Rankings, you can see many of the institutions that we've already just been discussing in the previous graphs. But how do we reach these results? It's a careful and meticulous process of taking data from various sources, including a survey of academics worldwide and statistics on who is producing the most cited research. This then feeds into 13 different metrics, shown here by the group of titles slightly in orange, which then move into 5 different pillars that make up the ranking, and each pillar has its own score, which you can actually access on our website. And those cover the main areas of university activity, so teaching, research, the citation impact of that research, industry income, so how much income universities actually gain from working with companies, and their international outlook, including the numbers of international students, the share of international staff that may have at the university, and also the international collaboration that takes place for research. All these aspects then feed into the final university ranking score. As well as the main rankings, we have various different subject rankings. 8 are shown here, actually. And you can look at those separate subject rankings on the website too. So now I just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough of how you can find out more information about the ranking of these universities from our website, timeshighereducation.com. If you go to the main page of the website and then click rankings, which takes you through to all the different lists and rankings that we have, not just the main world university rankings, but our impact rankings, which look at how universities perform against the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and other subsets of the rankings that look at different regions, the subject rankings, which I already mentioned, as well as things like the Young University rankings, which look at universities that are aged under 50. If you click through to the main university rankings, you can see the full list of institutions from around the world headed by Oxford. With lots of different information about those universities just on this screen, including the number of students, the staff-student ratio, and the proportion of students that are international. You can also click on the scores, which show the scores in the individual pillars that I was talking about before. You can filter by country, and also by university. So here I'm going to look at Surrey, given that Max Liu is going to be presenting shortly. And if you click on Surrey, you can see lots of individual information about its ranking position. Surrey is actually 59th in the latest impact ranking, for instance. Its performance over time, and individual scores for different subjects. So that concludes my section of presentation today, which I hope has given a helpful overview of where students from East Asia choose to study in the UK. Of course, this was before the pandemic. It was the last academic year, 2018, 2019. But that gives you a flavour of the universities that students from the region already study at, the ones they choose to study at, and what their place is in the World University Rankings. Thanks very much for watching.
So thank you very much, Simon. That was Simon Baker. I think it's helpful just to understand the kind of resources that are available and making sure we're able to use those resources to the best of our abilities. Please keep your questions coming in. I can see them flowing in. We'll make sure we address as many of them as we possibly can in the Q&A session that's coming up very, very shortly. And where we can't, we will certainly be sharing this material after the event and adding more context and more value. But for now, before the Q&A panel opens, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Max Liu. He's the Vice Chancellor at the University of Surrey, who's going to give a university leader's view on the current situation with regards to the coronavirus pandemic. Welcome, Max.
Thank you very much, Phil, for your kind introduction, and good afternoon and good evening to everyone. I'm so delighted to have this opportunity to share what I think the universities in the UK are doing and preparing to open the campus, and how welcome the universities in the UK to international students and what support will be available to you when you arrive. Next, please. Obviously, I don't look like a typical Brit, nor do I sound like a Brit with my funny accent. So who am I? So I won't repeat what is on the screen, but just to tell you a bit of background about myself. So I was born and grew up in rural China, in eastern China, Shandong province. At 16, I had a great opportunity and also luckily passed the national entrance examination to India Northeastern University in Liaoning province. And that's a few years after the Cultural Revolution. So, and thanks to a scholarship from Australia at 24, and also thanks to the China's opening up policy, I was able to travel to Australia in 1987 to do my PhD. So I spent most of my academic career in Australia, except for a few years in Singapore as a lecturer, and then as a sabbatical working in the US in Princeton University. So you can see that I'm very proud of my Chinese heritage, and also grateful to Australia and Australian people for the opportunity I had there in my career. But I'm equally proud of my newly adopted home, the United Kingdom, where I now work and live, because the UK is the most, in my view, diverse and open, welcoming country. And you can see from the screen that I was, shortly after I arrived, I was welcomed, invited to become one of the advisors to the Prime Minister on the Council of Science Technology, and joined the board of UK Research Innovation, and then made a Deputy Lieutenant in the County of Surrey. So just forgive me for indulging a bit of hubris. So I can say, truly, I'm one of the examples in Britain for what you can achieve in a modern Britain, because what it is, and the inclusive culture and the very supportive and strong science and education base. Next, please. Well, as you can imagine, I wouldn't be here if I did not feel proud of the institution that I'm now leading, not least in how the university's community, the staff and students and our supporters come together to contribute to the national effort, the local effort in fighting this coronavirus pandemic. And we also are very proud of the heritage and the legacy of the university in working with the real world in terms of linking to businesses and industry, the local community charities. And as a result, we are actually seeing a rising international reputation, and very renowned for our excellent teaching and student experience. In particular, student employability, we ranked #1 in 2019 in the country. Overall, we're in the top 20. So the University of Surrey has a lot of distinctive research strength, whether it's in space, 5G, and AI, nutrition, sleep, and just to name a few. Next, please. So the universities, like ours, most of the university have fantastic facilities, and some have like a beautiful campus that is not in the urban setting, but most of the university have state-of-art facilities for study, learning, research, and laboratories, which makes the UK universities the best place to learn, to play, and to work. Next, please. As we speak, the UK is still going through the COVID-19 pandemic. And this crisis has obviously posed significant uncertainty and challenges for the university sector and also for our students and prospective students like you. So I do appreciate there are some concerns from international students about how we might be able to start the new semester in autumn. But can I say that the COVID-19 at the moment, as I read it and from the information we have, is under control, getting over the peak, but coming to level 3 in the alert system. So we are now currently at step 1 and moving to step 2, and with some social distancing measures relaxed. And the government are planning to open schools from 1st of June, and more businesses and public places will be open in July. I expect that we probably reach level 2 by mid to end of September, meaning that there are still some minimal social distancing requirements. And all universities that I know are planning to open laboratories, even from now and next week, and planning for starting a COVID-19 secure campus operation from autumn. For example, the universities like ours, and many universities I know, are trying to develop plans and really prepare to implement social distancing measures as required, such as supplying PPEs, sanitizers, and then spaced classroom seating and testing and tracking. So I can say that the safety and well-being for all students are absolutely paramount. So we'll do everything possible to ensure students have a safe and meaningful learning and living experience on campus. Next, please. So just to give you more examples, I think universities across the country are planning, working very hard. Of course, we moved to online teaching and learning this current semester since March with tremendous effort, I already said, from staff and students. And this is what the QS survey and other surveys like ABCP survey shows. Students like you expect in the next 6 months or so, there will be a mixed mode of delivery. In fact, a lot of students can accept online teaching to a certain point, to a certain degree, maybe 3 months or less. So the next semester, really, from autumn, we'll probably see a range of flexible and innovative models. For example, from one end of the spectrum, online lecture for both students on campus and remotely, face-to-face lecture with practical sessions, tutorials, with social distancing measures in small groups. So there's many other innovative combinations of such offerings. And indeed, many universities have announced, including the University of Surrey, some courses, the postgraduate courses, you can choose the option to defer to January and February start. Next, please. Right, the universities, and according to some surveys, students are really keen to see more help and more services. That's very important to the whole application enrollment process, including admission, health information. Universities across the UK sector are ramping up the application and admission communication with more clarity, more support, enhancing the support on health, for example, and devoting more resources to look after students in mental health and well-being, and providing hardship funds for students in need, and also additional teaching and learning resources to improve English language proficiency, essential skills for jobs, for example, we offering that, and leadership and so on. Next, please. So the government, I think you probably hear from more from the panelists who are very distinguished and experienced in the sector. Strong support, including visa, as we heard from Simon, and also the Office of Students is actually a new regulator is going to ensure universities are going to provide exceptional quality of teaching and programs they offer, even online. And governments and universities, all sector agencies such as UUK, THE, and SIUK are all united in their position to promote equality, diversity, and inclusion, and in standing together against any form of discrimination or hate on any grounds. And that's important. I can tell from my own experience. This is important to many students. I think the UK is a very diverse and welcoming society. As I mentioned before, the university is really welcoming places. It's a global community. Next, please. I just want to leave you with a few words here. That is, I hope the presentation has given you some information that you need to know to ensure that you're confident and you're inspired to join a UK university in the autumn, because truly the UK is a global community with a lot of great ideas and a strong foundation on science and dedicated professionals and lecturers in our universities. So can I just say that I hope that you would enjoy this seminar and pick up some useful information to enable you to start your study in the United Kingdom this autumn. And I hope that you are inspired to join us and to make the most of your dreams and opportunity here in the UK. So looking forward to welcoming you in the UK in autumn. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Max. That was a very helpful introduction to the situation as far as a university leader is concerned. So now you're going to stay with us for the panel Q&A, but I'm delighted to welcome our other panelists. So joining Max, we have Guy Doughty, who is the UK Director of SIUK. We have Anne-Marie Graham, who is the Chief Executive of the UK Council for International Student Affairs. We have Chris Skidmore. He's a former Universities and Science Minister, actually right up until earlier this year. He is an MP for Kingswood in the UK, and he's also a highly regarded historian. We have Vivienne Stern, is the Director of Universities UK International. So what I'll do is I'll ask each panelist one question each that we have prearranged from students in advance, and then we will open up to the Q&A. I see there are many questions coming in, lots of questions. If we don't get through all of them in this next session, we will try and provide as much follow-up material as we possibly can. But perhaps if I could turn first to you, Vivienne. More information is starting to emerge now from the UK universities. Max and others talking more openly about what they think will be the case when the new academic year starts in September, October. What's your sense? Will international students really be able to come and start degrees in the UK in September? What's the current picture from your perspective?
Yeah, well, everybody's looking for certainty, and it's understandably frustrating that in many cases institutions haven't yet confirmed exactly what the arrangements will be. But the bottom line is all universities are planning to enrol students this autumn. Some have already come out and described how they will do that. Most universities have already got plans in place, even if they haven't been announced. And those plans I think fall into three categories. There's plan A, if we can open campuses as normal. There's plan B, if there are some restrictions in place around, for example, social distancing or other requirements placed upon us by government and the circumstances. And plan C, in case it's really impossible to do face-to-face teaching in the first stage. Some universities have plans to offer teaching and learning opportunities online as they're doing now, and then move people onto campus when that's possible. And what I think universities have been waiting for, you're starting to see institutions coming out and confirm what they're planning to do, but we're just waiting to see what the situation is likely to be in the autumn. And since nobody's got a crystal ball and we can't predict exactly, a lot of universities have been sort of holding back their announcements. The best advice I can give to anybody who's thinking about studying in the UK is, if you know where you're interested in going, if you have perhaps a short list, or you've already perhaps submitted an application, stay in touch with the admissions team at that institution, because as Max has described, they'll be able to tell you what they're planning, they'll be able to tell you how it will work, and they'll be able to answer the kind of questions I can see coming up in the chat about, for example, if you're going to be starting some things online, does that mean I should come to the UK? How will the process work, accommodation and all of that sort of stuff. So the bottom line is, stay really closely in touch with the institution you're interested in, and that means you'll be the first to know when they come out with their plans. I mean, the other thing I'd say is, I know there's been a lot of confusion about announcements made by some universities in the last few weeks about plans to limit, for example, lectures as a face-to-face teaching mechanism. And I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of Cambridge or other institutions, but I would say that if you actually look beneath the sort of surface of those announcements, what universities are doing is saying there are some kinds of teaching which is quite possible to envisage delivering in a safe way, with social distancing rules in place, and others where that's really difficult. So lectures are one of the forms of teaching, which I think some universities are saying, well, could we do that a different way during this period? But it doesn't mean there won't be any face-to-face teaching in UK universities.
Thanks, Vivienne. That's a really important point there, actually, because there was a sense that perhaps people thought that Cambridge has announced that they were simply not doing anything on campus for a year, but that's very much a question of people thinking in terms of lectures as the sole means of delivery of teaching and learning. And of course, there are multiple ways of really high quality ways to engage in terms of teaching and learning, particularly seminars, and as Oxbridge is famous for, the close, one-to-one tutorials system. Anne-Marie, could I perhaps ask you to reflect a little bit more on what steps universities are putting in place to, ensure international students, currently enrolled are being looked after properly? I think there's a huge issue to make sure that they are given the right environment, feeling safe and looked after in terms of current students, but also steps that are being put in place to ideally, when students join face-to-face in the autumn, in September, that they're given a sort of safe and a warm welcome. Could you reflect a little bit on that, please?
Sure, Phil. Thanks very much. Yes, I mean, the UK institutions have invested in student support for many years. It's one of the strengths of the UK higher education sector. So when this pandemic hit, I think it was very easy for institutions to prioritise students' safety and well-being, and make sure that currently enrolled students had measures were put in place to support current international students, whether they remained on campus or whether they decided to continue their studies online at home.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Just to let you know, we've just taken the video off because your audio was a little distorted.
Sorry,
but we can hear you very well now, so thank you.
Connection is unstable. I'm not sure whether you can still hear me, but international students are able to access the UK's National Health Service should they need it, and any available mental health resources. And
Anne-Marie, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I think...
Yeah, so just to reassure students that obviously international students can access the National Health Service and any of their institutions' own health and wellbeing services, which are usually linked to the National Health Service anyway. There's been lots of investment in mental health support as well, which is really coming into its own, I think, at the moment during this period of isolation. And also students...
Sorry, Anne-Marie,
Can you not hear me?
we've had a couple of connection issues with voice distortion. So what I hope we can do is perhaps I'll move on to Chris.
Unions are offering a range of support services as well, online and on campus, because I think they're the two main.
Yeah, we're losing a little bit of connection, Anne-Marie. So we'll put you back on mute, and I think I'll move on to Chris, and hopefully we can bring you back in later on in the conversation. Sorry, there's some problems with the bandwidth. So, Chris, you were obviously Minister for Universities in the last government. You're very au fait with the policy environment. Perhaps you could reflect a bit on how important international students are to the UK and how open the UK is to international students. There's often political controversy, media controversy about how welcoming the UK is in terms of its visa regime, for example, its post-study work options. Could you reflect on what the government position is and, of course, how we should also perhaps move further to demonstrate that we welcome our international students?
Yeah, well, thank you, Phil, and thank you also to everyone watching. It's great to see we've got almost up to 1,000 people watching live, and I hope everyone watching will consider the UK as a destination of choice, as you said, in what is a tremendously important, life-changing decision, choosing which university you want to go to. And obviously, unfortunately, we're in a situation where that decision is being made more complex by the current pandemic, but that shouldn't put students off from making that long-term decision. And I hope that many still will think about applying for this year instead of deferring. I think that there will be huge opportunities as a result of what's happened to be able to seize the moment, as it were, and to contact institutions that will welcome you with open arms. But I wanted to say that even before the pandemic, obviously the situation around international students was something that we as the UK government were considering especially closely. We've seen a large rise in the number of students coming to the UK, and also transnational education and UK degrees being taken abroad at campus universities in the past 10 years or so. And we wanted to look at how we could try to help encourage that further. We have not only the Department of Education, there's the Department of Business that I sat in, and also the Department of International Trade that is very concerned about looking at how we can improve our global reach as the United Kingdom. And obviously, you're all aware of the political circumstances of us leaving the European Union after the referendum that took place nearly 4 years ago. And we finally took that step of officially leaving the EU earlier this year. We're currently in a transition phase. And as part of that transition phase, we have enormously important political legislation sort of going through the House of Commons over the next couple of months. One of those key pieces of legislation is actually a new immigration bill that's going to put a points-based system in place, and also, I think highly encouragingly, change the visa regime when it comes to international students. I think it's clear that we've seen from that graph earlier that a mistake was made in deciding to turn off that international student post-work study work visa, and now a decision's been taken as part of our international education strategy, which I published last year, to be able to now have a return to a post-study work visa of 2 years, but also to look more broadly at some of the bureaucracy surrounding some of the international student visas. So I think now is the time for us to be making changes in the House of Commons. I'll be looking where possible to see what amendments we can make to that legislation to make that transitionary moment from whatever country you're coming from to the UK as welcoming as possible. And I know that universities, I've been to about 60 of them, and I think one of the great strengths of the UK system is its diversity. We've seen, from the league tables that we shown earlier, how many UK universities in the top 100, about 18, but I think all UK universities pretty much are in the top 5% globally also. But I would say that each individual institution, as the Vice-Chancellor Max Liu has demonstrated, has its own specific merits and its USP, as it were. And what I'd say is, when it comes to looking at the UK education system, both in terms of the teaching, and we may have to have blended teaching models at the moment, bringing on online learning, but also those small seminars that are it's not just about lectures in the UK. In other countries, larger institutions, nearly reaching 50, 100,000 students, often it's lecture-based. And I was a lecturer myself at Bristol University, and a lot of the teaching I did was in very small-based units of up to 10, even less than that. And I think that's one of the advantages of the UK system, as I say, and that's not going to disappear. And so looking at how, as a government, we can put in place measures to make the immigration system stronger for international students, I think is already coming on board anyway. But I would encourage students to look at what is going to happen even with the pandemic, that these universities will be there for you and will encourage your welfare, whether on campus or off campus. I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And it does seem as if, with the predictions of an overall reduction in international student mobility, that students are in a stronger position, I guess, in terms of a buyer's market. Their consumer power becomes stronger because universities do want to recruit them. So there might be some implications there in terms of the competition flipping from in favor of the students around what they can achieve and which institutions they can get to. But let's reflect on that a little bit later. I just want to turn to Guy. Guy, obviously you run an advisory service for students specifically wishing to study in the UK. What's your sense of the current demand for UK study? Has the pandemic really reduced the interest and the hunger for study abroad as far as you're concerned? Is the UK still a top destination, or are we potentially going to lose ground to other nations that may have a slightly better perceived record on handling the pandemic, for example? What's your sense from where you sit?
Thank you very much, Phil, and hello, everyone. Well, this year we had been seeing dramatic growth. It was a really marked growth on last year, for instance, right the way through till, say, February. I think there's been some flattening of it. Obviously, there's been a decline in new inquiries from February in some markets and from March in other markets. But actually, we're quite pleased at how it's held up over the last few months. And over the last few weeks, we've been seeing an increase and a return to our normal inquiry numbers. And particularly, we measure that in now the events that we're doing online, and there really is keen interest. So we remain quite optimistic that this year can remain a very good year for UK institutions. The demand does seem to be holding up there. I think the next few weeks are quite vital. I think students have been quite patient, but it raises a point that Vivienne, I think, made a little bit earlier, that we would welcome some certainty in terms of what's going to be happening for the September intake. We think that quite a few institutions will delay the intake slightly, maybe till October. We just mean by a few weeks there, and might have new methods of teaching, blended hybrid models, but still open up in September. I think that's one thing that's very important, that we get more and more information out from the universities as what their intention is, and that we get that information over the next few weeks. It's of course incredibly difficult, as other speakers have explained, but there is still a good opportunity for students to be coming. The interest is still there. we expect the demand to pick up as soon as people are aware. We notice that students, and the surveys seem to also indicate, are very committed to universities keeping as close to the traditional physical face-to-face model as is possible. I note the point of the panelists in saying that there's been a lot of innovation in how universities can open up. And I think, as Max mentioned, students are prepared to have a period of online study, but particularly at postgraduate level, they really do want that traditional experience, and to come here and you know, to have the face-to-face contact and to be able to make the networks with their peers. So we're quite convinced that the market is a very good one at the moment, that the UK is a very popular choice. The post-study work visa has made a tremendous difference to everything. Really fueled growth over the last year. And as long as we can open up now, we think it'll be a very good year, and the rates of deferrals will be kept to a minimum.
Thank you very much, Guy. Just to emphasize, we will be providing a full recording of this session once we have completed it. I understand some people are having some sound difficulties. I think that is actually an issue at the local level in terms of bandwidth, but we'll certainly be providing the video for everybody after the event. And of course, there are so many questions flooding in. We will also provide as many follow-up opportunities to have these questions answered as possible. I'll move on now to, actually, Anne-Marie, do you want to, we did lose a bit of you. I think you're back in, hopefully your connection's better. Did you want to just finish the point you were making? I wanted to really focus on the measures that are in place to support students through this very difficult time, international students who may be away from home, maybe still isolating on UK campuses. Do you want to come back in before I go to the Q&A?
Yes, I mean, obviously, just to reiterate that international students are accessing all of the support that's available to them. The student unions, student services, all of the student services support has been offered remotely to current students, whether they're in the UK or overseas. So it's really important, again, for students to make sure that they're in touch with their institution, as Vivienne said earlier. The institutions are really keen to make sure they're in contact with as many students as possible. So current students should really be getting in touch with their institution if they've got any questions. And I think for prospective students should be reassured that all of the investment in taking the support online that current students are benefiting from will be something that international students who are thinking about coming here in the autumn will be able to benefit from over the summer as well. Please do contact your institution that you're interested in. They'll have information on visas, on English language testing. Their website is being updated every day for offer holders and applicants as well. Our UKISA website has a really detailed Q&A on all aspects of the visa and those technical elements as well, and I see there's lots of questions around that. So do contact your institution, do look at the UKISA website. But I do want to just close and reiterate that, you know, student safety and well-being is at the heart of institutions planning at all times, and they're really adapting to make sure that students will be supported, whether they start their course online, face-to-face, or a blend of the two. There's lots of support being put in place, whether it's smaller class sizes, social distancing in common areas, contactless technology, so that you can be reassured that you will be safe on campus when you start in the autumn. And institutions as well are working very hard to make sure that guidance is in place to support students through any quarantine measures that might be in place. But I should stress that quarantine measures are reviewed every 3 weeks, so please do keep checking in with gov.uk and with your institution to make sure that that information is up to date. our country is continuing to open up, our infection rates are continuing to go down, and as restrictions ease, access to wider facilities and the broader UK culture is there for our international students as well. So I hope to see as many of you and welcome you here in the autumn.
Thank you. And I know lots of people are asking questions around resources and websites, so we'll certainly share the UKISA resources websites and all the various links as well with the follow-up material. Let's go to the questions. Ryle Asano has asked, how much influence has COVID-19 had on the competitiveness in admission for UK universities? I did mention earlier that there is a sense that perhaps there is now a buyer's market. Does this mean students are in the driving seat? Could they potentially negotiate around access requirements? Maybe I should turn to perhaps to Vivienne on that sort of policy environment. Is there going to be more of a buyer's market this September, Vivienne, with the reduced overall numbers?
Well, I think, I mean, all UK universities will want to maintain their standards. I mean, there's no point in recruiting a student who then isn't able to successfully complete a course. So we'd expect universities to want to maintain their entry requirements and standards. And I think anybody coming to UK university on the basis of the quality of the provision that we offer would expect that too. Having said that, I would expect there to be quite a lot of students who for one reason or another can't come this year, might be looking to defer till 2021. And that means that I think if you're sort of going for a really highly selective institution, this September, you may find yourself in a smaller pool than you would if you applied for next September. Now, it's impossible to tell because I think, as Guy suggested, we can see from some of the evidence that we've got from international students who are still sort of thinking about whether they come this year or they change their plans, that demand seems to be holding quite strong. So, I mean, my message, and I know I keep saying this, is just get in touch with the institutions you're interested in, make contact with the admissions team, find out what the arrangements are, make sure that you're signed up for updates and alerts when they start to announce the way they're going to deliver teaching. And of course, you can ask them about the kind of the support that might be available, including things like financial support.
Vivienne, a flip side, I've seen 2 or 3 questions asking about September 21. Clearly, some people are thinking of deferring, both domestically and internationally. I guess we can fairly safely assume that competition will be stiffer in September 2021, this simply on the basic maths that there's a larger pool of applicants. Is that fair?
I mean, it's impossible to predict. I mean, I know that on the UK front, we've got a growing number of 18-year-olds, so there should be increased competition irrespective of whether people defer or not to 2021. I mean, the other thing I would say to those people who are thinking, do I go now or do I defer, is we do not know how this virus is going to evolve. We don't know where we'll be in September 2021 either. It's quite possible that we have a period where restrictions are relaxed this autumn, people are on campus, there is face-to-face teaching, and then you know, a second or even a third wave of the virus makes it difficult later next year. Now, we don't know, and as I've said before, I don't think any of us have a crystal ball. You know, applicants, students need to make the best decision for them. And, you know, it will of course depend on your own circumstances. But I guess my advice is that if you are thinking about something as big as traveling internationally for study, you know, my sense would be you want to take advantage of the opportunity that's available now, stay closely in touch with the admissions team, and make a decision based on what they're able to tell you about how they will be delivering teaching. My expectation from all the people I've spoken to in universities, I mean, Max can talk about Surrey, is that universities have pretty much got their ducks in a row to make sure that the teaching and learning opportunities they can provide this autumn will be top notch. You know, we've had a bit of time to practice with online teaching and learning environments, to get assessment right, to make sure that all of the, you know, the glitches in the system, for example, around study online and visas, that they're ironed out. So I think you can be pretty confident that universities would be well set up for it. Bill, I also want to get to the post-study work question, but I'm just going to ask you to make sure at some point I get to talk about it.
Yep, I've got that on the list. I mean, just staying with that theme, actually, on the quality, several people on the Q&A have talked about, is there potential for reducing tuition fees. Now, I think there is an issue and a challenge that perhaps I could raise with Max around this perception that online or blended learning is somehow lower quality and should therefore be cheaper. What's the prospect? Maybe if I stick with Max around the specifics issue around quality and cost and fees, and then maybe broaden that out to the sort of more political situation around fee levels. But Max, do you want to come in on that? I mean, presumably it's no cheaper to deliver blended learning than it is to deliver face-to-face. In some cases, perhaps even more expensive.
Thank you, Phil. I think I absolutely agree. I agree with the remarks made by Vivienne and others. I think in terms of the quality control, I think all institutions actually making great effort to be more innovative and then devote more resources in delivering the online teaching, learning, tutorials, and other support online. In fact, the ingenuity demonstrated by the last few months, how we quickly came to the online learning environment and really unleashed a lot of the potential for digital delivery. Of course, you wouldn't compensate for some of the social element that campus life, campus activities can offer. But with a blended model, as we heard, I think that will be looked after. Can I just emphasize again that the health and well-being and safety are center of our minds in all universities. Therefore, even there will be an uncertain future with the pandemic, I think the universities are all investing more to ensure the social distancing, ensure contact track and tracing be in place. So the quarantine bubbles or the zones on all campuses has been thought of. And we're going to ensure if you are here and all our students will be safe, and will be safe also while you also continue the blended learning online and small group tutorials and so on and so forth. So therefore, coming back to the question, the cost is going to be higher, not lower, and the quality is going to be maintained, if not improved. And putting aside the social element, which I totally appreciate.
Thank you. Chris, could I ask you to reflect on that? Presumably there is no real chance in the short term or medium term of universities charging less. Obviously the domestic fees are set with legislation. There's variability within an overall cap. International fees are more in the gift of the institutions. But in terms of the way universities are depending on student tuition fees, there's probably very little prospect of any university wanting to drop its fees. Is that a fair assessment of the situation in terms of the political landscape?
Yeah, I think when you look at the UK higher education ecosystem, there's a really important point here around maintaining quality, but also consistency, and ensuring that all institutions continue to be viable. Obviously, it wouldn't be misleading to say that we are expecting a reduction in student numbers when it comes to sort of international students, and obviously we'd like to be able to ensure that as many students who are able to come here choose this moment this year, as they'll be the first generation of students to benefit from the 2-year post-study work visa, which returns from September this year for the intake. But also, as Vice Chancellor Liu's mentioned, the investments that go into creating a campus are both physical in terms of maintaining those environments. And so when students are able to journey, I have spoken to several universities already, active measures are now being put in place to ensure that there are special halls for possible quarantine measures that might be needed, that social activities are being put on, and that students will be welcomed as soon as they're able to do so. But this is obviously an international market as well, so I'm sure universities will be looking closely at their international competitors, whether in Australia or the United States. I mean, these are choices that obviously students watching will be making. all I would say is that the value of a UK degree is one that is internationally renowned. We've seen, I think, 50 UK leaders currently, global leaders hold a UK degree, and maintaining the quality is something that all our institutional leaders are absolutely determined to do. And with that does come the necessary investment that is needed to make sure that that quality can be maintained. So I wouldn't expect a reduction in fees. I can't answer individual institutions, but certainly from a government perspective, when it comes to home students, we had this debate politically about whether we should reduce fees. It would just decimate the sector and destabilize the sector, and we simply wouldn't then have some of the institutions in place to be able to deliver what I think is a fantastic life-changing opportunity for individuals. And I would just like to say, one of my great regrets probably in my life is that I didn't choose to think about maybe going to study at an institution abroad when I had the chance. I can't now, obviously I've got children, I'm tied down by jobs and responsibilities, but that's something I will always miss out on. And those watching have this moment to choose. You do not know what will be happening in a year's time. You probably have a fantastic moment to decide to be in that first cohort, to be there, able to benefit from the 2-year post-study work visa, and then to see where your life takes you.
Thanks, Chris. So Vivienne and Anne-Marie, you've both mentioned a desire to talk about the post-study work situation. Anne-Marie, can I bring you in first? What is the actual situation with the visas? And then we'll perhaps reflect beyond that on the actual jobs market itself. But you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think just to clarify that, the graduate visa route is confirmed, and any student who completes a degree level course in summer 2021, like the course for which they receive their confirmation of acceptance of studies from a tier 4 sponsor, will be eligible. So that applies whether it's you're coming to the end of your second year now and next year is your third year, or it's about the completion of the course. So if you are completing your course next summer and you've been studying in the UK, then you will be eligible. So that applies if you're starting a 1-year master's in autumn this year, even if you started it online for a few weeks and then come to the UK subsequently. When you complete your course in summer 2021, you will be eligible. So I just wanted to clarify that. I appreciate there's still more detail to come, but it is confirmed, and therefore you will be eligible. We're trying to get a little more detail out there as soon as possible, and Vivienne will want to come in on that as well.
Vivienne, please do.
Well, just to say, I think, well, first of all, Chris was the minister who secured this fantastic change, so it's lovely to see you again, and I think it really is a positive move. I think it's quite important for the UK too. I mean, I think we've got a kind of opportunity to try and retain some graduate talent, give people an opportunity to start working in UK businesses, and I think that will also hopefully give us a mechanism to get UK businesses equipped to export and to trade internationally and to have successful international relationships. So I think it's a win for us, but it's certainly a win for those students who start programmes this autumn onwards, who graduate, as Anne-Marie has said, from summer 2021 onwards. I know people are sort of asking lots of questions about the sort of nuts and bolts and details of it. Our Home Office is a bit overwhelmed at the moment. They're trying to introduce the new streamlined visa system that Chris described, as well as dealing with the sort of the emergency things that relate to COVID-19. So they just need a bit of time. It's not that there is a political doubt that the route will be introduced. Ministers have reconfirmed it as recently as last week. So you can be confident that it will be there.
I think that's very, very important to stress and really powerful, because that is a really significant change in that policy environment that should be really powerful. I guess the other side of that question would be, of course, we're imagining the world economy is going to be in dire straits. Would the actual opportunities in the UK be there for graduate jobs for people who are coming in now? I guess we're not sure how the economic recovery will come and how it'll pan out, but what's the general health of the jobs market? People have asked a few questions based on the actual availability of meaningful post-graduation jobs. What's your sense there? Perhaps I could come back to Chris maybe on that one.
I think obviously looking at the UK jobs market, and obviously there has been an increase in the number of people who are claiming unemployment benefits, obviously a large number of individuals who've been furloughed. And, I don't want to get into a narrative of saying that somehow the pandemic is going to change everything. It may not, but there may be a number of businesses which are going to have to adapt quite rapidly to be able to survive, to innovate and to adapt. And obviously as human beings, that's what we're very good at. I think personally that's going to lead to a number of individuals who may have been made unemployed sort of needing to reskill and retrain. But that's also, I think, where the graduate market will come into its own, because you have a young cohort of individuals who will have the adaptive skills that are needed as part of this new economy. If those are watching are interested in going into areas of engineering or science and technology and research, for instance, I know that's a quite highly specialized route, but I was very concerned as a minister to make sure we created a pipeline that extended internationally also, so that actually if you were looking for careers when it comes to science and technology in those new innovative industries, that we created also new visa routes around a global talent visa. And there will be opportunities for those individuals having decided to study, to then go on to do postgraduate study and then to carry on their commitments into the UK. And I'm absolutely convinced that the narrative we want to create of a global Britain is you came to the United Kingdom to study. We want to, if possible, keep you here and benefit from your new skills in some of these new technologies. And so I think that it's been overblown, this idea that everything is going to be in dire straits. I think actually students who are able to demonstrate they have the ability to move countries, to be able to demonstrate the resilience they've shown and the adaptation they've taken to be able to maintain their studies are going to be the first in the queue when it comes to some of the new skill requirements and the new jobs that will be needing those skills for the future.
Thank you. Max, a question from Romit Agarwal was linked to that, but actually regarding campus jobs, so jobs that people would take during their studies, opportunities to earn while they learn. What's your sense around the opportunities on campus with regards to people's opportunities to earn?
If that's a question for me, Phil?
Yes, if you don't mind, thanks.
Yeah, even as we speak during the COVID crisis, we still have a lot of jobs open, temporary jobs, jobs for students to assist with various activities. I think when we reopen the campus, start the new semester, I think the activities on campus will ramp up. There will be a lot of opportunities for students to work part-time, during their study period. And of course, our government, as the minister already said, Chris said, helping the business to really get back to business as we get out of the pandemic lockdown as quickly as possible. A lot of investment. We try to support the business to recover, and there'll be new jobs. There'll be a lot of sectors created post COVID-19, and therefore, in the towns and cities our universities in, there will be new opportunities for graduates. So I'm quite optimistic about the prospect of our students in the post-study work environment. Of course, there will be a global impact on the economy, but I think in the UK, there will be new opportunities emerge.
Thank you. Guy, you've been very patient throughout this. I wondered if you could clear up some of the practical questions we're getting. Of course, there's a lot of detailed practical questions that perhaps we need to support students with regards to sharing resources after the session. But a couple of people have asked specifically around IELTS. Is there a sense that we might see universities reconsidering their English language qualification requirements, and also some questions regarding the timings, applying for 2021 entry. Is there any likelihood of flexibility or movement around the specific deadlines? Could you perhaps reflect on some of those pressing practical questions students have raised?
Well, I think in terms of the English, we've already seen that universities have shown quite a lot of flexibility. They're considering other qualifications. They're aware that most of the physical IELTS tests, of course, can't take place at the moment. So there are alternative English tests, and a lot of universities are adopting their own internal English tests. So with that, the best advice is the advice that was given earlier. Make sure you stay in contact with your advisors and the admissions teams at universities to find out what their specific arrangements are, because the universities have recognized that very early on and are very keen to demonstrate as much flexibility on the English requirement as possible. Albeit given, I think, the point that Vivienne made a while ago, that we must maintain the appropriate standards, obviously, that the courses are going to be in English. So that looks at the English arrangements. In terms of the other arrangements for 2021, well, at this point, the deadlines are as normal, but I think what the universities have shown over the last couple of months is that they are, again, flexible, and if there's a requirement to change deadlines, then they'll certainly do that.
Thank you. And Vivienne, one of the things we talked about before this meeting began is the Universities UK International has a campaign, a We Are Together campaign, which I think is a helpful way. Obviously, we're talking a lot about students needing a constant flow of information, a constant flow of facts, but also examples of what's happening on campuses to respond to the global pandemic. Do you want to tell students a little bit about the We Are Together campaign, what it would offer them if they are to follow that and get involved with that?
Yeah, well, we started this actually because we were aware we've got a lot of international students who are still with us. So, we're in this lockdown phase, but there are lots of international students still in our universities. They're in halls, they're being looked after by university staff, all sorts of things happening, food deliveries, all sorts of mechanisms of support, but it's a lonely time. I mean, if you're away from home, you're worried about, your friends and family, you maybe can't return home. We just were very aware that was a hard set of circumstances. And so we started with the idea, we wanted to create a kind of social space where international students could talk to each other about what they were going through and, try to help them sort of come together and foster a bit of positivity by showcasing stories of the way that universities were supporting international students and international students were supporting each other, and also the many things that our international students are doing to contribute to British society, working in our NHS, volunteering, all sorts of things. And then we thought, actually, this is really useful because we've got international students who are with us now talking about their experience of being with us now. Could we use this to give prospective international students, people who are thinking of coming here in the autumn, an idea of what it's like? So that's the next step. We decided that we'd try to get current international students to tell it like it is, give prospective students a bit of a sense of what learning online is like, how their institutions are supporting them, and create a bit of a space where, rather than us getting in the middle of it, just with the formal advice, there's an opportunity to see what it's really like. There's an Instagram page. It's #WeAreTogether_UK. I can sort of maybe distribute a link to that afterwards. And you can get to it via our website, Universities UK International, or via UKISA. And we just want a sort of conversation to start. So if you do happen to be a current international student and you're here, we'd love to hear about your experience.
Thanks. I think that sense of community is, really, really important. And actually, if I could go back to you, Anne-Marie, there was a question from Gusto Messac, who was asking about people's mental health. You did mention this earlier in your remarks, but what measures are in place during this period to really help and support to support students, I beg your pardon, who may well be feeling, under severe mental health pressure in this extraordinary situation. Certainly, they might be isolated from home and family as well.
Yes, I think there's lots of good work going on across UK universities around this. I mean, as I said, most institutions have their own health and wellbeing service anyway. A lot of them have dedicated mental health provision, some of which is bespoke to the institution, some of which is linked to their NHS provision in the area. But we've seen there are also lots of apps available for international students as well, that are focused on mental health and wellbeing. And we've seen a real sense of community spring up, as Vivienne has already mentioned, either fostered by the university and student societies and students' unions, but also by the students themselves. There's been some lovely real communities built up to along that theme of, so that we're in isolation, but we're not isolated. And I think that's been really heartening to see that spring up, because a lot of the students that are here because they want to be. They chose to remain in the UK. Others are here because they can't get home because of lockdown in their own country. So it's really been a challenge to make sure that we're in touch with all of those students and that we're able to support them, whatever their own personal circumstances are. And I think there's lots of online cafes, social events, mental health blogs, yoga, you name it. They're trying to come at it from a holistic point of view. So I think it's really important that students are checking in with their institution, seeing what's available, particularly checking in with their students' union as well. There's some really great examples out there, and a lot of them are showcased on the We Are Together Instagram feed as well. So I would encourage people to check that out.
Thank you. And perhaps sticking with you, and then maybe going off to Guy as well, there's been quite a lot of questions regarding scholarships, for prospective students. What are the options? What are the sources? Where would you start looking if you wanted to understand the scholarship landscape for studying in the UK?
If you mind, I'm going to hand that one over to Vivienne, because I know she's done a lot of good work on this recently, so I won't see her thunder on that.
This is one of my hobby horses, because I mean, there's actually a huge amount of scholarship, bursary and other financial assistance available through universities and through a variety of kind of philanthropic or other organisations, and it's not immediately obvious how you find it. So here's the tip. If you want to find out about the kind of government scholarships, the UK has a Study UK website, which will give you information about how to apply for those big flagship national scholarships like Chevening, the Commonwealth scholarships, and great scholarships. But my advice is twofold. First of all, if you've got an institution in mind, contact them and ask them whether there are any scholarships that you might be eligible to apply for, or are there any other forms of financial assistance, because if you don't ask, you don't get. And secondly, there are commercial sites, apps that help you search for scholarships you might be available for and eligible for. And this is where I start hesitating, because I'm not a student, and although occasionally when I'm trying to work out which one is best, I pretend I am, suddenly become an Indian master's student interested in studying biochemistry. But I think that places like, there's an app called Grant Ferry, for example, which just scoops all the information off university pages. And there are lots of others. Perhaps, again, as a follow-up, we can give you some links to those. But start with Study UK, start with talking to the institutions you're interested in, and then search scholarship apps. And as I say, Grant Ferry is one of them, but there are lots of others.
Thanks. We'll definitely be sharing those, a list of resources afterwards. Guy, did you want to come in on that at all before I move on to the finale?
Yes, and not surprisingly, I'm going to say also contact Study SI UK, because we're well aware of not just the scholarships, but also a lot of institutions offer, and is much more common, discounts to international students. And so we've been gathering all that information over a number of years now. And so I'd say contact us and we'll be able to indicate where you might be able to access those discounts.
Thank you. And panel, I'm going to ask a closing question. We have around 5 minutes left, but I just wanted to make sure we've had so many Q&As pouring in, we've had so much chat going on. Have you spotted anything that you feel we haven't addressed yet and we ought to in this final session, before I go on to a final question? Anyone want to jump in now with specific information points? Vivienne, I can see your hand.
There's a lot of people asking about visa application centres, which are enclosed in many cases at the moment, and also things like the ATAS process. There are a lot of questions about whether you can start a visa application, when those places will reopen. And we were talking to the Home Office about this last week. I think as various countries start to emerge from lockdown, those visa application centres are going to start opening up. The Home Office, the UK Home Office, is absolutely well aware that they're going to have a surge of demand when that opens up. And they have said to us repeatedly, they're really confident that they can catch up. I think when the visa application centres open up, the ATAS system will also get started. It's blocked because you can't do one without the other. It's a bit frustrating, but you can start to familiarise yourself with the kind of information you're going to need to have available when you make the visa application, because the visa application centre is only really one element of the process. We're hammering on the door of the Home Office all the time to get them to make this a bit easier for people who are worried about those practical things. And Rhian might want to say more on that.
Yeah, just to agree with Vivienne, we are really lobbying the Home Office hard on the finance, and just to make that clearer. But Home Office are really working very hard to try and make things as streamlined and as simplified as possible. But it is very much, we actually are seeing that the visa application centres in the UK will be reopening next week, which is one first step. Obviously, internationally, they've still got a way to go. But I think, again, please do keep in contact with your institution that you're interested in applying to or joining in the autumn. That's the most important source of information that you can go to in the first instance. So please do contact them about your visa application, whatever concerns or questions you have.
Thank you very much. And I think the final question, Guy had mentioned this was a question that he gets asked quite a lot from students who are coming to SIUK for advice. And I wondered whether I might ask Chris actually to address this one, because I think it might be a bit unfair on any of the others. There is speculation about the financial harm to British universities. There is some media speculation, including some names being mentioned, about the possibility of university failures, university closures. Chris, what's your sense of that? I mean, in terms of the political landscape, there's a market out there. There's been a deliberate attempt to build a market, and some market failure has been seen as, legitimate, but we haven't actually ever seen a British university actually go to the wall. Could you offer a sense of the landscape, Chris, with regards to the politics there, but also what mechanisms would be in place if a university did find itself in trouble to make sure students are actually protected?
So when it comes to looking at student protection measures, but also the financial sustainability of the UK's universities network, I would like to say that actually we took forward legislation several years ago, probably 5 years ago now, that actually put in place measures to ensure that, while on the one hand we protect the vital autonomy and academic freedoms of our universities, which is why the UK's ecosystem is so widely respected, we wanted to make sure that every registered university, and particularly for a government that was helping to fund British students, or certainly provide student finance through loans for British students, that measures were put in place to ensure that every university that was going to be a registered, approved university through a body called Students had it in place a financial protection plan, not only for the students themselves, but also the institutions. So institutions can't actually operate under the legal structures that have been created unless they have at least 5-year financial protection measures in place, and they have reserves in place also. So I would reassure everyone that work has been done in advance, well in advance of the pandemic, to ensure universities are protected. Now, obviously there are individual institutions that are more vulnerable than others, and that was the case before the pandemic. And case ultimately that there are some mergers of institutions. You know, I'm not going to name individual institutions, I don't think that'd be fair, but what I would say is that mergers have taken place in the past. If you looked at UMIST, which was an institution in Manchester, it joined with the University of Manchester, and it actually made it a stronger university for the region as a result. So, you know, if there are mergers in the future, I'm not saying there are, that's not something to be feared, but you know, I wouldn't expect any individual institution to close, putting students' livelihoods at risk. You know, the legal framework certainly won't allow that to take place.
Thank you very much. That's pretty much taken us exactly to the end of time. I'm very conscious there's a huge number of questions that we haven't quite answered. So what I'm going to suggest is, of course, as a follow-up to this, the video will be distributed to all participants. I'm going to ask all the panelists offline to recommend the key resources pages, websites that they believe are particularly pertinent, particularly Vivienne and Anne-Marie on the really technical side of getting your visas and navigating the scholarship world, etc. Of course, Times Higher Education's website, thewur.com, has lots of data and information on it. Please do visit that. And in particular, perhaps we'll ask the colleagues at SI UK to really follow up on some of those very specific bespoke questions. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for participating. Thank you for engaging so much. Thank you for considering the UK as your study destination. Your contributions to our university system is absolutely invaluable. You make our universities stronger, so hopefully we'll see some of you in the United Kingdom not far in the future. But most of all, thank you so much for the panelists for sharing their time and expertise to help clarify what is a fluid and extraordinary situation. So thank you so much. We are now at the end of the meeting. I would give you a virtual round of applause, but much appreciated, and we will stay in contact and hopefully have sessions like this as things emerge and clarify going forward.